All right, let's just dive right into the big question, and one that probably keeps a lot of people up at night. Can Bitcoin actually be hacked?
I mean, you've seen the headlines, right? Every few months, it seems like there's another story about a massive crypto hack. Billions of dollars just gone. It's totally fair to wonder, is my Bitcoin actually safe?
And look, this isn't some new thing. The history here is pretty stark. You've got the infamous Mt. Gox hack way back in 2014, a platform that was handling something like 70% of all Bitcoin transactions at the time. All the way up to the, well, spectacular collapses we've seen recently, like with FTX. The numbers are just staggering, and that's why the fear is so real.
But to really get what's going on, we need a bit of a roadmap. So here's what we're going to do. First, we'll look at these headlines and the fear they cause. Then, and this is key, we'll break down the 3 different security systems at play. After that, we'll explore the digital fortress that is the Bitcoin network, pinpoint where the real hacks are happening, and finally, we'll calculate the insane price of a full-scale attack.
Okay, so let's start right there, with the fear. Those headlines, they aren't exactly wrong, but they might be telling a very different story than the one you think you're hearing. In 2022 alone, an absolutely mind-boggling $3.8 billion was stolen in cryptocurrency hacks. It's a number that creates huge amounts of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But it makes you ask a really important question. When you hear crypto is hacked, was Bitcoin itself actually the thing that got hacked? To answer that, we have to get really specific, because this right here is probably the most misunderstood part of crypto security. You see, not all hacks are created equal, not even close. So it is absolutely critical that we make a distinction between hacking the Bitcoin protocol, that's the core code, the fundamental rules of the network, and hacking a platform, like an exchange, that just happens to use Bitcoin. These are 2 fundamentally different things. And guess what? Nearly every single headline you've ever read is about the second one, a platform breach. So let's think of it as 3 totally separate security systems. First, you have the global Bitcoin network itself, the protocol. Second, you've got the crypto exchanges, which kinda act like banks. And third, you have your personal wallet where you hold your own keys. Each one of these has its own unique vulnerabilities. So let's zoom in on that first layer, the Bitcoin network. The best way to think about it isn't as a company or some piece of software, but as a digital fortress. Now, the walls of this fortress are built from blocks of data. Each new block gets cryptographically chained to the one that came before it, kind of like sealing it with a unique digital fingerprint. If you tried to go back and change just one tiny transaction in an old block, its fingerprint would change, and that would break the entire chain from that point forward. It makes rewriting history next to impossible. And the process that secures this chain is called proof of work. You have these global participants called miners, who are all competing to solve a really complex math puzzle. It's designed to be incredibly difficult, and it takes a massive amount of real-world electricity and specialized computer hardware. They are literally converting physical energy into digital security. And here's where the system gets really clever. There's a separation of powers. You have the miners, who are competing to propose new blocks. But then you have a global network of thousands of independent nodes that act as the referees. Each one of these nodes keeps a full copy of the entire history and checks every single transaction against the rules. So if a miner tries to cheat, the nodes just reject their block. It forces the miners to play by the rules, or all that money they spent on electricity was for nothing. Okay, so if the network itself is this digital fortress, then where in the world do all those billion-dollar hacks come from? Well, the answer lies in those other 2 layers we talked about. And this really gets to the heart of it. The real vulnerability isn't the fortress itself, it's about who holds the keys to get inside. Exchanges are custodial, which is a fancy way of saying they hold your private keys for you, just like a bank. It's super convenient, sure, but it also creates a massive single point of failure. If they get hacked, your money is at risk. A non-custodial wallet means you, and only you, hold your keys. Total control, but also total responsibility. So the vast majority of all the money that's ever been stolen, the billions you read about, it all comes from these kinds of attacks. Phishing scams trying to trick you, malware on your computer, or direct hacks on exchanges to steal their giant stash of private keys. You see the pattern here? All of these are targeting the human layer or the software layer around the fortress. They're not breaking down the fortress walls. Which brings us to our final and maybe most critical question. What would it actually take to break the fortress itself? To successfully attack the Bitcoin protocol? Well, the most famous theoretical attack on the Bitcoin network is something you might have heard of. It's called a 51% attack.
This is basically when one bad actor gets enough computing power to control a majority of the entire global network. Now, this wouldn't let them steal old coins or change the fundamental rules, but it could let them do things like block other people's transactions or, more importantly, reverse their own recent transactions, which would let them spend the same coins twice.
To pull this off, you would need more raw computing power than every other honest miner on the planet, combined. You'd literally have to outmuscle the rest of the world.
And the price tag for trying something like this? It's astronomical. The estimated upfront cost just to buy the specialized computer chips you would need is over $20 billion. And that's not even counting the mind-blowing electricity bill you'd have to pay to run it all. The sheer economic cost and the pure logistical challenge of pulling this off are so enormous that, to this day, a successful 51% attack on Bitcoin has never happened. The network has just gotten so big that a direct assault is pretty much economically and practically impossible.
And that's the whole point, really. The security of Bitcoin isn't built on trust. It's a trustless system. It's built on the opposite idea. It assumes everyone is a potential threat. It forces every single participant to constantly provide verifiable, mathematical proof that they're playing by the rules. It creates this incredibly resilient network that audits itself in real time.
So this leaves us with one final big question to think about. We've got a system that is an absolute fortress at its core, but is vulnerable around the edges where we humans interact with it. How does that change the way we think about what it means to truly own a digital asset? Does real security ultimately come from the code, or does it come from our own vigilance?